There's a saying in many training communities: the body will not go where the mind has not already been. Another one you may have heard is the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. The idea is simple. If you do not prepare beforehand for a given situation, you'll not be prepared when it happens. But what happens when government preparations move from proper to totalitarian? We'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans, and welcome to the Constitution Study. This is where we read and study the Constitution. We teach the rising generation to be free, and I'm glad you could join me today. Now, we're going to talk about these government preparations for emergencies. But if you want to find out more, please head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. You can find the article I wrote on this as well as others. Now, I'll talk a bit more about the website at the end of this episode, but for now, let's talk about the Presidential Emergency Action Documents. Have you heard of Presidential Emergency Action Documents, or PEDs? More likely, you've heard of a president's emergency powers. These documents are plans created by various presidential administrations to prepare for various emergencies. Taking the form of executive orders, proclamations, and messages to Congress, the idea is that these PEDs can be put into effect on a moment's notice. As with so many things in government, PEDs started as a good idea that has morphed into a sort of Damocles hanging over the rights so many of us cherish. The Eisenhower administration had its own sort of Damocles hanging over its head: nuclear war. As part of the plans for the continuation of government in the event of a nuclear attack, President Eisenhower created the first of what became known as Presidential Emergency Action Documents. PEDs are classified as secret, and therefore the details are kept secret, not only from the public, but in many cases from Congress as well. However, these documents are periodically reviewed, and several declassified notes from these reviews will give us a hint at what's inside. Research by the Brennan Center for Justice into previous PEDs gives us a glimpse into what presidents believe their emergency powers include. For example, authorized detention of alien enemies or other dangerous persons within the United States, suspending the writ of habeas corpus by presidential order, provide for various forms of martial law, the ability to issue a general warrant permitting the search and seizure of persons and property, establishing military areas such as those created during World War II, suspending production of the Federal Register, declaring a state of war, and authorizing censorship of news reports. So let's take a look at some of these assumed powers and where they came from. Now, for those of you who believe that the Republican Party's goal is to protect your rights and liberty, I present the case of President George W. Bush. See, in 2004, 2006, and 2008, in light of the 9/11 attacks, the George W. Bush administration initiated a holistic review of the current PEDs. In response to a Freedom of Information Act, the George W. Bush Presidential Library turned over to the Brennan Center for Justice over 500 pages of information generated during the reviews. Now, while the actual PEDs remain classified, the information gathered sheds a light on the disturbing powers a president may claim to have in an emergency. Reading from Title 47 of the United States Code, Section 606D, upon proclamation by the President that there exists a state or threat of war involving the United States, the President, if he deems it necessary in the interest of the national security and defense, may, during a period ending not later than 6 months after the termination of such state or threat of war, and not later than such earlier dates as the Congress, by concurrent resolution, may designate, 1. Suspend or amend the rules and regulations applicable to any or all facilities or stations for wire communication within the jurisdiction of the United States as prescribed by the Commission. 2. Cause the closing of any facility or station for wire communication and the removal thereof of its apparatus and equipment. Or 3. Authorize the use or control of any such facility or station and its apparatus and equipment by any department of the government under such regulations as he may prescribe upon just compensation to the owners. Under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the Constitution of the United States, Congress is authorized to declare war, not the President. Yet here we see Congress once again delegating its power to the executive branch. Not only has Congress claimed the power to delegate its authority to another branch, but it claims the power to authorize that branch to violate the Constitution of the United States. The suspension of rules and regulations is one thing, but the closing or takeover of a private facility is a clear violation of the Fifth Amendment. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Now, should the president unilaterally proclaim that we are at war, or merely that there's a threat of war, your access to information can be shut down or controlled by government. This law was enacted in 1942, which is why it specifically references facilities or stations for wire communication. But would a president today extend such an understanding to include the internet? I mean, after all, at some point, all internet communications passes through a wire, either copper or fiber optic. Notes from the review of these documents during the George W. Bush administration shows that they believe this act grants very broad powers in such an emergency. Now, for those of us who make a living by communicating via these facilities, our businesses would be suddenly controlled by Uncle Sam, extending the theft of both liberty and property even farther. Just imagine the dystopian future where an administration already sending examples of misinformation to social media companies have the power to directly control them. Shortly after the Supreme Court opinion in Board of Maine versus Bush that recognized the rights of prisoners in Guantanamo Bay to have their detention reviewed by a court, an internal memo from the Bush administration showed that one of the PEDs was being reviewed in light of a recent opinion. Now, while not positive proof, it does certainly imply that the administration had plans to suspend habeas corpus, a power the Constitution leaves in the hands of Congress since it exists in Article 1, where Congress is created. According to Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the Constitution, the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion the public safety may require it. The privilege of habeas corpus can only be suspended in cases of rebellion or invasion, not in a national emergency. Did you know there is a law that allows the federal government to restrict travel to certain countries? Title 22, Section 211A reads, "Unless authorized by law, a passport may not be designated as restricted for travel to or for use in any country other than a country with which the United States is at war, where armed hostilities are in progress, or where there is imminent danger to the public health or physical safety of United States travelers." Notes from the George W. Bush Presidential Library shows not only that they were aware of the law, but they highlighted it during their PEDs review. Doesn't it make you wonder under what circumstances a president would be prepared to restrict travel? And would it be limited to foreign travel? Or would a president claim the power to restrict interstate travel as well? Now, some of you may be thinking, okay, these are serious, but they're only for national emergencies. We're okay at the moment. Wrong. America has been in a persistent state of national emergency since 2001. Proclamation 7463, published September 14th, 2001, reads, "A national emergency exists by reason of the terrorist attacks at the World Trade Center, New York, and the Pentagon, and the continuing and immediate threat of further attacks on the United States. Now, therefore, I, George W. Bush, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, I hereby declare that the national emergency has existed since September 11, 2001, and, pursuant to the National Emergencies Act, I intend to utilize the following statutes." Now, this proclamation has never been rescinded, so we are still in the state of national emergency that started with the 9/11 attacks. A very funny thing happened on the way to this state of national emergency. You see, President George W. Bush proclaimed that, by virtue of the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and laws of the United States, I hereby declare that the national emergency has existed since September 11th, 2001. Yet nothing in the Constitution delegates to the United States, much less the President, the power to declare a national emergency. Since that power is not delegated to the United States, and neither is it prohibited to the states, then that particular power remains with the states. Now, whether or not it should be a state power can and should be discussed. But before such sweeping power is simply handed over to Washington, D.C., we the people, through our states, ought to put some restrictions and limitations on that power, shouldn't we? So when does a president become a king? Well, according to Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, a president is an officer appointed or elected to govern a province or territory or to administer the government of a nation. Now, the difference between a president and a king is more than just an election. After all, there is such a thing as an elected king. The role of president is to administer the government. In the United States, the president's power to govern is supposed to be limited by the Constitution and the laws of the United States. Compare that to a king as defined by Webster's 1828 dictionary. The chief or sovereign of a nation, a man invested with supreme authority over a nation, tribe, or country, a monarch. Kings are absolute monarchs when they possess the powers of government without control, or the entire sovereignty over a nation. So when the office of president becomes more than the administration of government, when the office is invested with supreme authority, that office ceases to be a president and instead becomes a king. And when the office of president assumes absolute control over the government, creating laws and administrative courts, the president becomes an absolute monarch. Now, when the president, with the stroke of a pen, can overrule the Constitution and laws of the United States, he morphs from an absolute monarch into a despotic dictator. America stands on the precipice. Multiple presidential administrations have set in place rules and orders to effectively take over and rule this country. They did this behind closed doors, not even letting Congress know what their plans are. All it would take is the right person and the right conditions for someone in the office of president to declare a national emergency and activate these despotic powers. George Washington warned us. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual. And sooner or later, the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. They say never let a crisis go to waste. Well, unless the American people wake up and regain control of their government, all it will take for freedom and liberty in America to disappear is the right crisis to present itself. I'm not quite sure which disturbs me more. The fact that there are secret documents supposedly allowing the president to take over the country in a national emergency, or the fact that we've been in one for over 20 years. Either way, isn't it we the people that are supposed to be telling government what to do? That's what Ronald Reagan said. And if the president can simply overrule the Constitution based on an executive order or proclamation, are we still a constitutional republic? These are serious questions. And I know there are things that maybe we should allow the president to do, but we should set boundaries around them. But it should be we the people that are doing it, not presidential administrations. That's why, as John Jay said, it is so important that we all read and study the Constitution of this country, that we all teach the rising generation to be free, so that we know what our rights are and that we're prepared to defend and assert them. Now, if you want to find out more, join me for the tour I'm putting on, the Blessings of Liberty Tour. Find out more at constitutionstudy.com/tour. I am traveling the country, speaking to people about those blessings of liberty and how we defend and assert them. Now, you can check and see if I'm coming near you, but if not, you can also invite me to come speak at your group or at your event. There's a form right there on the page to do so. I'll reach out to you and we can see if we can make it happen. Now, if you can't make it to the tour, try out our Constitution study online. Just go to constitutionstudy.com/study. A group of us meet every other Monday, 7 p.m. Central Time, to read and discuss and debate the Constitution. And you can join us. Again, go to constitutionstudy.com/study to find out more. But let's not simply allow government to run amok. Let's not presidents become king. Let us assume our mantle as citizens, as the rightful masters of both Congresses and courts, as Abraham Lincoln said. Let us learn what the Constitution says and learn how to use it to protect our rights and liberties. And we can share those blessings of liberty, not just with ourselves, but with our posterity. That is a goal I hope all of us can get behind. And if you're interested, well, join me here next time for the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from